Hi, I'm Professor Martin, and today we are going to talk about financial aid. How in the world are you going to pay for college? Because it is crazy how expensive tuition is. We're going to cover just the basics of a couple different topics today, and it's not going to be anything too in-depth, but I'll give you the basic rundown of the different options of paying for college. So anything that is going to be your economic, your dollar value of being able to cover your tuition. Okay? And to mention, financial aid is not just about tuition itself. It's anything you would need to survive while you're a college student. These include basic expenses such as living, so your apartment, your mortgage, whatever it is that you need for shelter. It's also going to be our food, right? It's going to be utilities. It's going to be anything else basic that you need to survive, because if you're a college student, if you're full-time, if you're not working, it's not going to be that your only expense is going to be tuition, right? You don't get to not pay your mortgage or to not pay your apartment lease each month just because you're a student. Unfortunately, right? Wouldn't that be so nice? You still have to pay for food. So all of these things, you still have obligations and expenses, and you need to be thinking about those on top of the tuition costs. Okay, so especially if you're not going to be working, which it's really hard to work and be a student at the same time. It is extremely difficult. So what options are out there? Okay, the very first thing we're going to start with is the FAFSA. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is federal money. Okay, so it doesn't matter what state you live in, if you're in the United States or if you're a US citizen or if you're here legally for education or for employment. We're going to start with our FAFSA. Okay, as the name indicates, it's free. There's no cost to fill it out, and it is an application. So FAFSA itself is not going to give you money. FAFSA is the application of where you can go to fill out the data that would be used to assess what kind of subsidy or scholarship or grants you might qualify for. Okay, so you always want to start with the application. FAFSA should be filled out the year before you want to use the money or receive the money. You can do it sooner, but federal money, it's not unlimited. So when they run out or when the fund starts to go low, you may not receive funds if you wait until the last minute, right? So we want to apply early. Now, the FAFSA usually opens in October for you to apply for the following year. The same as generally you do a college application at least like the year before, the fall before you want to start, the next fall. FAFSA is the same way, so apply really early, okay? So, and it opens in October. Okay, so it is our application. Again, remember that it is for federal money. There is state money, sometimes city money that is available as well, and options for loans and scholarships and other things that we'll talk about. This is specifically federal. Okay, so it's going to be our federal sources of financial aid. Generally, a lot of students with their bachelor's degree or below, most of the time, unless you have parents that make a ton of money and you live with your parents or your parents are supporting more than 50% of your living expenses, most students do qualify to go to school for free, or they just pay a portion of their education. Not all. So the FAFSA and how you qualify for different funds, especially if you're looking to get your tuition covered, it's all going to be dependent on your like how much money you pay in taxes, or how much like your taxable income is each year. So if you're young and you live with your parents, if you're under 24 and your parents still support you, even if you don't live with them, if they're still paying more than half of or the majority of your expenses, your parents might be claiming you as a qualified dependent on their taxes. So with your FAFSA, it's going to go towards your parents' tax money and how they file their taxes. If you're like me, like I moved out when I was still a teenager because I joined the military. So once that happened, my parents could no longer claim me. I was not taking any aid from them. They were not supporting me in any way. I didn't even live in the country. My first duty assignment was Germany. So I signed up as a teenager immediately after graduating high school, and I went to training in Texas, and then off to Germany I went, and I started doing my own taxes. So when I became a college student, I claimed I did everything based on my own taxes. Okay, so but if your parents are supporting you, if you live at home, or if anyone else, even if it's not your parents, are claiming you, the FAFSA is going to be done using their tax information. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. So even if you don't make any money because you personally don't have a job and you have $0, that's not going to matter if you're not supporting yourself. Okay, so just something to keep in mind as you're looking for aid to cover your tuition. There are some options. So you fill out the FAFSA, and then what happens? FAFSA will, like your application, the results from that will tell you what you're eligible for or potentially eligible for. What are the options? There's grants, there's scholarships, and then outside of the FAFSA, you could do savings, right? You could have a savings account. So let's talk about grants and scholarships and loans, right? We don't want to forget the loans. So grants, scholarships, and loans. Grants are typically free money that you can qualify for. And by free, I mean the federal government is paying and not you, because of course we all know that nothing is free, right? Someone is paying, it just might not be you. So grants are one of those things that you can qualify for. If you qualify for it, you don't have to pay it back. It is yours regardless. It typically comes to you. So if you receive grant money, you will receive a check, or it will be automatically deposited into your bank account, however it is that you prefer, or whatever you sign up for. And you don't have to give it back. You don't risk losing it as long as you're a student, right? So as long as you stay eligible, you're not going to lose it. It's grant money. It's given to you. Once you have it, you're not going to lose it, right? It's safe to deposit it, and you're good. And then you then would be responsible for taking that grant money and paying your expenses. So that could be tuition, it could be housing, it could be food. Your grant money will tell you what things you can use your money on. But as long as you're paying your tuition, right, that's what it's there for. Okay, so there are also scholarships. And again, we're talking federal, we're staying with the federal first. So federal means like our national government, the government that controls like all 50 states and the territory, as opposed to our states. Okay, so our federal. So we have our grants, right? And then scholarships in general, it's money that goes to the university. So whatever college you're going to, the scholarship money typically goes to the university, and it's applied to the tuition on your behalf. So typically with scholarships, no one is sending you personally money. It goes to the university. Scholarships aren't like grants where no one just gives it to you. You generally have to do something special, and they're often competitive. So with a scholarship, you might have to write an essay, or if it's an art scholarship, you might have to create arts, and it might be an art competition. It depends on what your major is sometimes, and it depends on who is offering the scholarship. Okay, so with FAFSA, there are federal scholarships that you could qualify for. The thing about scholarships that make them different from a grant is that not only are they competitive and you're going to have to do some kind of extra something to apply, and not everyone is going to get it, it's also something that you could lose. So for example, if you are on a sports scholarship and you stop playing sports, you're likely going to lose your scholarship, right? That's the reason why they're covering your tuition, is so that it's an enticement for you to go and be an athlete for them. If you're injured and you can't do it, right, there's a lot of different ways you could lose your scholarship. You could also be on an academic scholarship, and if your grades fail, you might lose that scholarship. Okay, so when you apply for scholarships, just make very certain that you understand the terms and how you could lose your scholarship, because no one wants to have to drop out of school because you've lost your scholarship and you don't know how to now afford to cover your tuition. Okay, so we want to be able to commit to keeping that scholarship, right? If you can qualify for a scholarship, that's amazing. So you want to keep it, right? You want your tuition covered. No one wants to pay tuition. I myself am paying tuition out of pocket. I can promise you, no one wants to pay tuition. It's a bummer. It's so expensive. Right, so if you have a scholarship, be very appreciative of your scholarship and the organization that is giving it to you, or the federal government that's giving this to you, whoever is giving it to you. It's a really awesome thing to have, so make sure you know how to keep it. You don't want to lose it, and you definitely don't want to lose it because you didn't read the terms of the scholarship and you just even accidentally did something that would cause you to lose your scholarship. If you lose your scholarship, it's also possible that you might be forced to pay back any scholarship money that you've been given. For example, if you are on a one-year tuition-free sports scholarship and you stop running track and field for that university 2 months into the fall semester, they might make you pay back the tuition they've already paid on your behalf, right? Because you didn't fulfill your obligation. So not only can you lose the remainder of your scholarship, but you could have to pay back what you've already been given, right? So the only thing that makes losing a scholarship worse is having to pay back the benefit you've already received. Okay, so, and that's the unfortunate thing about education is it does generally go by a full semester. So if you lose it part way, you might have to pay it back. If you're on some kind of merit scholarship or some kind of scholarship that says you must maintain a GPA over this amount, which is very common, right? No one wants to give up their own department or their own money, wherever it's coming from, to cover your tuition for you not to do well. If you're gonna waste their money, they're gonna want their money back. Okay, so it's really important that you keep up a good GPA, that you study really hard, right? Again, having your tuition covered until you actually pay tuition and understand the sacrifice that it takes to pay your tuition, you just might not appreciate the luxury of having your tuition covered by someone or something else. Okay, so be sure that you get good grades and do not lose your scholarship. Okay, loans. If you don't get a grant that's going to cover your full tuition, or if you have a grant and a partial scholarship, but still all of your tuition is not covered, or if you don't qualify for any. If you're in a graduate degree or higher, you're not going to qualify for any FAFSA money. Like, it is pretty much assumed that once you finish your bachelor's, you're going to cover your tuition on your own. And as someone that has a doctorate degree, I can tell you that is not fun. It is not fun to have to foot the bill for your own tuition. And in a later video, we will talk about how much tuition costs for each degree as a national average. And again, if you have not researched this, it might be quite a shock. Just knowing how much tuition costs. So you might have to get a loan. I do not encourage a lot of borrowing. If you are going to borrow, just do so very responsibly. The last thing you want to do is end up in a ton of debt. Now, this is not going to be like the pros and cons of getting a loan, because that's just all about your own personal philosophy. I would say I've never gotten a loan to cover my education. Like, I've always just worked really, really hard. I graduated with my bachelor's as a magna cum laude. Like, I had almost a perfect 4.0. Like, I sacrificed and I worked very hard to be able to qualify for grants and scholarships that would cover my tuition, because I did not have the funds to do it myself. And I was just kind of raised, like, my personal philosophy is just don't get into debt, right? If you can't afford it, it's just not the time. My camera died right in the middle of that. All right, where was I? I do see the argument on the other side that to fund your education, you may never have the money. For example, for me, I knew that I wanted to be an attorney or at least go to law school when I was 20. And if you've never researched the cost of law school, it can be $250,000. Maybe more, maybe a little bit less, depending. So I don't know that I would ever just have that kind of money. So with that, I did not cover the cost of my tuition. I worked really, really hard to get good grades and to maintain good grades, and studying and being a student has always I'm very passionate about it, and I love to learn and I love to be a student, even though it is really hard, and sometimes the sacrifice, it feels overwhelming. But it's what I committed to doing. And if you're in that position and you know you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a psychologist or something that takes a doctorate degree or a professor, you just might be in the position where if you can't find grants or scholarships or some other way to fund it, you just might have to get a loan or forego having that career. So if you have to borrow, or if you decide that it is in your best interest to borrow, the mindset behind that is that ideally when you get that really kind of unique one in a lifetime job opportunities, that you're going to be able to afford to pay back that loan. Just keep in mind that might not always happen. So if you want to become a lawyer and you successfully get through law school, which not many do, My law school class, it is a smaller private school, but when I started, there were probably 300 students, and after the first semester, half of them were gone, and after the first year, maybe 20% more of those were gone, and then by the time we graduated, the class had less than 100. So if you can get in, not everyone makes it. Not everyone makes it. Either they drop out or they just get eliminated. If you don't do well after your very first midterm, your very first year, you either will get dismissed from school or you will get put on probation, and then they might let you stay until finals to take it, but it's semester by semester. You're never guaranteed the next semester. So you might not end up with that dream job that you think is going to be rewarding enough to allow you the money to pay back your loan. So just something to keep in mind. It may or may not happen. So just if you're gonna borrow, just borrow responsibly. Okay, so I never think that education is a waste of money or a bad idea. I have lots of degrees that I've never planned on using that I just love to learn. I just really wanted to know that subject, so I got a degree in it. But I know that's not for everyone. So just know yourself and your limitations and what you're comfortable with, and just stay within that and just research. Lots and lots of research before you decide. In addition to grants, scholarships, and loans, there's also savings, right? So if you have a checking account, you likely also have a savings account. You could save for college. Your parents, if you're very lucky, might also be saving for your college education. Mine did not. My parents did not go to college, and they always told me, if you want to go, you got to figure it out and pay for it on your own. So that is exactly what I did, but there was several years leading up to me knowing that I was going to go to college and that I wanted to go to college where I started saving. So this is not a federal program, but there is something called a 529 college savings plan that is just for college. But where it does kind of get into federal is it does give you a tax, there is a tax incentive. So any money that you put into your college savings plan, you are not taxed federally on that money. But you can only use that money for education, and the last time I checked, you could also use it for if you're purchasing a first-time home. So if you're a first-time home buyer, which is originally how I cashed out my 529 college savings plan, because I did not get to go to college as soon as I thought I would. And then being a military veteran, I got most of my undergraduate education while I was still on active duty, and the cost of that is covered 100% by the military branch that you're in. So I did not use my 529 for education purposes immediately, but I did buy a house when I was, I want to say 24. So right after I got out of the military, I bought my first home, and I cashed out my 529 education plan to pay for the down payment and the expenses of moving into my first home. But those are the only two things you can use your college savings plan for, because there is that tax incentive. So just know that if you do invest into a savings plan and you use it for anything other than that, like if you have an emergency or you get into a car accident and you have to buy a new car and your insurance isn't going to cover it, or if you have unplanned medical expenses, none of these are good reasons or justifiable as far as taxes go and the IRS. So if you cash out your college savings plan for anything other than education or first-time home buyers, if that's still a thing, you will have to pay a big penalty for it. So not only will you have to, you'll have to cover the taxes that you saved, but there'll be an additional penalty on top of that. So you're really committing to using that money for your education. It's not just a free, easy way to save money on your taxes. Okay, so that is it for financial aid. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. I'm very happy to help, and I hope you have a great day in class.